Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all about this important issue. I'm going to focus my talk today, my comments on the violence that Great Migration families experienced in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s as a result, oftentimes, of their success in the kinds of endeavors that Professor Parman was just speaking about in the job market and issues around housing. My comments today focus on the racial terror that African Americans experienced in California in the 1940s and 50s and beyond. And mostly I'll talk today about Southern California families, though the acts of violence that I'll be describing happened across the state. This testimony that I'm giving is based on my research that I did on racial terror for my book, West of Jim Crow. I'm going to be focusing on the Ku Klux Klan in California. And it's important to say that while the Klan might be one of the most visible groups that attacked Black homeowners, Black workers, and Black families in California, just one group that terrorized Black Californians, and there would be many other offshoots of the Klan on white supremacist groups that would do the work of segregation and white supremacy. But I'll be focusing my comments today on the Klan. Now, when we think about the Ku Klux Klan, in spite of much evidence to the contrary, I think Americans still tend to focus on the Klan of the South and the Klan of the 19th century that was formed in Reconstruction to do exactly the kinds of things that Doug Blackman's work has shown us, which is to keep African Americans in a state of terror as close to slavery as possible. However, the second Klan, as it's called usually, of the 1920s was a Klan that was especially strong in the Midwest and in the West and in California. By 1921, the Los Angeles Examiner and the Black newspaper, the California Eagle, announced that the Klan had arrived in Los Angeles. The fledgling branch of the LA NAACP was quick to note the dangers that were coming with the Klan, and Charlotta Bass, publisher of the Eagle, would be one of the most important watchdogs of the Klan in California. She would regularly publish in the pages of her newspaper any information that she could get about the doings of the Klan in and around Southern California. Now, the extent of the Klan's popularity in Southern California, which is where they first organized, was revealed in 1922 when the LA County District Attorney raided the headquarters of the Klan in downtown LA. What they found was staggering. There were over 3,000 Klan members in LA County alone, and law enforcement from nearly every city in the state appeared on the list of the lists of Klansmen that were confiscated from those headquarters. There were, for example, 25 San Francisco policemen named on the membership lists. These membership lists were printed in newspapers across the state, and cities up and down California scrambled to address the fact that their city offices were filled with members of the Klan. Now, one would think that this kind of exposure would shut down the terrorist group. But in fact, as the local NAACP noted when they wrote to the headquarters, the Klan continued to operate in and across Southern California as if the raid had never happened and the exposure. In fact, recruiting events and parades were hosted by the Riverside Klan, the Anaheim Klan, the Oakland Klan, and on and on. Now, the 1930s is a time when we think that the Klan kind of disappeared in the United States, partly because of the rhetoric coming out of Germany and the unpopularity of this kind of white supremacist extreme rhetoric. It's true that a lot of members disbanded, a lot of chapters disbanded, and people couldn't pay their dues during the Great Depression. But that never happened, it never disappeared in California. And I think this is something that I wanted to emphasize here today, which is California was one of the few states that continued to have an active Klan throughout the era. They marched regularly in downtown Los Angeles and continued to recruit members up and down the state. Now, on to the Great Migration. As you know from previous testimony and from the other days you've had of hearings, the Great Migration, of course, attracted thousands and thousands of African Americans to the state, hoping for better jobs, education, and opportunities of all kinds, the kinds of things that Professor Parman has just been speaking about. Few of those Great Migration families thought that they would encounter the racial terror that we associate with the South, namely the Klan. But this influx of migrants, and particularly the presence of Black vets of World War II and Black homeowners, was deeply disturbing to white supremacists in the state. Some moved to action. Now, one of the most devastating examples of Klan violence is the story of O'Day Short, and I want to just tell you this story briefly during my time. O'Day Short was a refrigeration engineer who in 1945 purchased a 5-acre plot within the city limits of Fontana. Now, many African Americans like Short had been attracted and drawn to Fontana for jobs in Kaiser's new steel manufacture plant. These were good jobs. Of course, African Americans were also flocking to Richmond in Northern California for jobs with Kaiser. Now, the Shorts were the first Black family. This was O'Day Short, his wife, and 2 children. They were the first Black family to move into the city limits. Most African Americans had been pushed below, as they said, Baseline Street in a Black segregated neighborhood. As soon as the Shorts moved in, they were threatened by 2 deputy sheriffs who visited the property and told Short that he was out of bounds. Subsequently, the real estate agent who had sold O'Day Short the property visited and told Short, "We had a meeting about your case. If I were you, I'd get my family off this property at once." Now, at this point, O'Day Short took very calculated actions, and he reported this visit to his attorney and to the Black press. The Los Angeles Sentinel, a Black newspaper, published an exclusive front-page interview with O'Day Short. Under a banner headline, they recounted Short's encounter with the vigilantes and his dangerous predicament. Short's attorney, Ivan Johnson, was the law partner of Lauren Miller. Miller had recently been leading the legal charge against restrictive covenants, a well-known attorney in California. 10 days after the Sentinel published the story about the threat O'Day Short received, the Shorts' home burst into flames. The fire that engulfed the property began with an explosion, and neighbors rushed to the scene. Helen, the wife, and 2 children, as well as O'Day Short, were rushed off to the hospital. But the little girl, Carol Ann, died 15 minutes after they were admitted to Southern Permanente Hospital. The son, Barry, died the next morning, Monday morning, and their mother, Helen, died that same day on Monday. As soon as the flames subsided, there were multiple theories about how this explosion started and a massive cover-up of evidence. While the local NAACP immediately opened an investigation, and the Black press, including the California Eagle and the Sentinel, were on the scene interviewing neighbors and witnesses, it was clear to the members of the community that this murder was being covered up. O'Day Short died on January 21st, almost immediately after the district attorney told him that his wife and children had died. His murder and that of his family became the subject of a grand jury investigation, but the results were inconclusive. Members of the NAACP, the labor movement, the Black press continued to demand justice, but to no avail. The LA Sentinel described the situation this way. Jim Crow had kept Short from finding a home in Los Angeles. Jim Crow had cast him in the role of a violator of community traditions if he built a house on the lot he purchased. Jim Crow had warped the sense of duty of deputy sheriffs to the extent that they themselves had joined in a plan to deprive an American citizen of his constitutional rights. All the Shorts are dead. Only Jim Crow is alive. Now, this was not the only case of terror that African American families experienced in the 1940s and 50s. It's one of the most dramatic. But the 1946, the situation in Los Angeles was exploding. A flaming cross was placed on the lawn in front of the Hickerson family in South Central LA. The Hickersons had lived in the house for 2 years and had been waging a court battle against restrictive covenants. They were the only African Americans on their block. The police called the cross burning incident a childish prank. That same year, a fiery cross was burned in front of the Jewish fraternity at USC. College students also found KKK burned into their lawn. That same fraternity had also recently signed a petition against the use of restrictive covenants. 2 days later, a cross burned in front of Paul Aubrey's home on East 58th Drive in Los Angeles, and he too was fighting a restrictive covenant case. And there are several other examples. For the most part, the mayor of LA did nothing, and these attacks continued throughout the 50s. The assault on Southern California Great Migration families by the Klan and aided by police departments, real estate brokers, and federal loan programs paved the way for segregated neighborhoods that languished without city services. Although the Klan violence peaked in 1946 and it never returned to that level, in some ways it became superfluous as new groups formed the core of the backlash against the Black freedom struggle. And I'm speaking now about the many white supremacist groups that proliferated after Brown versus Board of Education, after the much publicized March on Washington, sit-in movements, SNCC, etc. But it's important to emphasize that while it might look different, this kind of violence continued well past 1946. The perpetrators of the violence didn't always wear white hoods, but they were very clear on who they were attacking. And Black homeowners in particular formed the core of this group. The white supremacist violence of the 1940s found new expression across the country and in California after Brown versus Board, and in Fontana as well. The backlash against school desegregation and the concomitant revival of the Klan became so successful in Fontana that by 1965, President Lyndon Johnson ordered an investigation into Fontana's Klan activities. 2 years earlier, in 1963, an African-American captain in the U.S. Air Force bought a house in San Bernardino only to watch it destroyed by arsonists before he and his family could move in. Little had changed in the 17 years since the murder of the Shorts. The Golden State had long punished African Americans who dared to challenge segregation, and some paid with their lives. And again, I've given you examples that took place largely in Southern California, but what I want to emphasize is when I was doing my research on Klan violence, using the records of the NAACP regional office that are located at the Bancroft Library at University of California, Berkeley, and also the NAACP records of the Library of Congress, I found just as many examples of violence against Great Migration families that were perpetrated by the Klan and other white supremacist groups that took place in the Bay Area, that took place farther north and farther south in San Diego. I have focused today my comments on Southern California, just to keep my comments brief. And I also want to emphasize what I said at the beginning of my testimony, which is, while I focused on a group that's readily visible and known to Americans, the KKK, and I have done that intentionally because it has so often been assumed that that kind of group did not operate in California. It's also the case that many other groups who are not as visible and not as well known were also targeting Black homeowners, successful African Americans, and African Americans who are challenging the kind of restrictive covenants and segregation and white supremacist practices in the state. Thank you for this opportunity to share this research with all of you, and I look forward to comments and questions. And I wish you all the best with this important work. Thank you.